Welcome back to Fantasy Sports Island. I'm your host, Thomas Z, and as you can see, I'm still marooned on this beautiful island all by myself, but I have my Hawaiian shirt, and today I have my White Claw. Thank you to my boy Armando for hooking me up with these. These are delicious, so I am good to go. Welcome to the podcast. We're going to talk some more fantasy football today. Let's go. So I'm just chilling on my island, having my drink. Love this stuff. This one's all gone, man. Good thing I got another.
Hey, thanks, bro.
Oh my god, it's my cousin Ricky. What the hell are you doing on my island?
Hey, man. It's Awesome Island, just chilling.
Yeah, I'm talking some fantasy football with my viewers here. You want to talk some fantasy football with me today?
I always want to talk fantasy football.
All right, let's do that. So today we're going to talk about myths versus reality. You think you can hang with that?
Yeah.
All right, well, here we go. All right, so our first topic of debate is you should always draft running backs in the first and the second round. Is this a myth or is it reality? What do you think?
Well, I would say it's a myth that comes from the scoring system where running backs tend to score a lot more in comparison to what quarterbacks score. A lot of scoring systems are different these days. A lot of people are going for quarterback-heavy scoring systems. So it really depends on the scoring system. And as everything, we'll probably repeat this a lot, there's a lot of different factors. It depends on the value you're getting, what quarterbacks are available, what running backs are available, what they did last year. Did they do something amazing that might be worth taking?
Yeah, so a guy like Christian McCaffrey, who outscored the field by a lot of points. Obviously, yeah, you're going to take him at the top of your draft in almost every league. But in leagues where, your quarterbacks are scoring 800 points, if they have a great season, like in my league, and the next best guy's getting maybe 650 points, well, now you have a 150-point gap between the first and second best quarterbacks. You might want to consider taking that quarterback in the first round. So you don't always necessarily want to take running backs in the first round no matter what. Yes, you do tend to want to take more running backs in the draft because running backs are more scarce and they get injured a lot. And if you're playing in a league where you're only starting one quarterback and you're starting two running backs and maybe even a flex, then yeah, running backs are more valuable. But don't forget about your wide receivers. Your wide receivers like Michael Thomas also deserve to go in the first round. And so you really have to just find the value in each player. If running backs and wide receivers are scoring about the same amount of points, then obviously they're going to have similar value, especially if you're starting the same amount of people. So this is a myth.
So now what about drafting combos? Is that a good thing?
So drafting combos, you mean taking maybe a quarterback and a receiver on the same team or a quarterback and a running back on the same team?
Exactly.
I'm going to go with reality on this one. I love doing this, and the reason why is because I play in mostly total points leagues. So the goal is not to win each week against a one-on-one opponent. The goal is to accumulate as many points as possible throughout the season. So if you have Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, and he's throwing deep to Tyreek Hill for a couple touchdowns in a game, you're getting massive points from both of them, and I'll take that all day long. What do you think?
I mean, I would agree. If you're talking about Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, that's a great combo. You're probably going to want that. But overall, I would say combos being always a good thing is a myth because to me, it's all about the individual players. Is the quarterback good enough for you to want to draft, and is the wide receiver good enough? You should look at them on an individual basis.
As separate entities, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you got a combo that might be underwhelming, and, it might not be a great thing. But
it could cripple you for your season if you have two guys that are kind of underperforming.
That's another thing. You better be right if you're going to get a combo, because if you fail, then you're double failing.
I wonder if combinations actually make your team more consistent or less consistent. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good point of debate. I would say it all depends, how the team is. It could make your team more consistent, but at the same time, if you have a bad week, you might have an extra bad week. So what do you guys think? Combo's a good thing? We seem to be a little iffy on this. Tell us what you guys think in the comments.
So here's another topic of debate. You should handcuff your stud running back. What do you think about that? Reality or myth?
Excuse me.
So it's obviously a myth. We're saying myth all the way. Why do you say myth?
Well, I mean, just because the starter is in a good situation and he's productive doesn't mean when he gets hurt, the same situation is going to be there for the backup. The coach might think differently of the backup. That's why he's the backup, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so there's a reason why he's the backup, right? So some coaches don't really like to feature one running back. Um, like let's say Adam Gase. Right now, he's kind of forced to feature Le'Veon Bell because they paid him all that money. But if Le'Veon Bell gets hurt, who's to say Adam Gase doesn't go to a running back by committee with his backup running back? I mean, there's no guarantee that he's just going to throw another running back in there and get all the carries and catches, right?
Absolutely. But at the same time, you know, it's not always the case like this. Sometimes you know the backup is going to be good in case the guy gets hurt. Like, let's say the year before they had the same starter, the same backup. The starter got hurt and the backup came in and killed it. You might want to get that handcuff. For instance, back in the day, Priest Holmes was an awesome running back. The Chiefs had a great running game, and they also had a great backup. And every time Priest Holmes got hurt, which he did every year almost, Larry Johnson would come in and just kill things.
That's an excellent point. So you have to look at all the factors. Handcuffing in general is probably not a good idea because now you're taking up two roster spots for one running back position, whereas you could just go out and get another starter on another team. That's probably the smarter play in the draft rather than just backing up your own running back. There's only a couple scenarios where that's the smart play. Like you said in the Priest Holmes, Larry Johnson scenario, if you were to draft Priest Holmes back in the day, you probably want to have Larry Johnson on your team to handcuff. But other than that, I don't see a reason to back up your stud running back in the draft. So I'm going to call that myth.
So how about this one? Should you always draft a player who you know is going to score the most points? Should you draft him in the first round before you get everyone else?
Okay, that is a total myth. Obviously, in most leagues, quarterbacks score the most points, so that would mean you're always taking a quarterback with your first pick. That's not how it works. You want to look for value over replacement. So you want to pick guys that are a lot more valuable at their position than other guys. So, for instance, in this case, it's Christian McCaffrey. You're going to want to look to take a guy like Christian McCaffrey who blew away the rest of the field at running back. These are the type of players you want to take with your first overall pick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at, let's say you look at all the quarterbacks and your quarterback in the long run might score 100 more points or 200 more points than your best running back. But at the same time, are there other quarterbacks you might be able to get later in the draft who are going to score similarly maybe? Those quarterbacks are still going to outscore the running backs as well. So it's all about value.
That's an excellent point. So it's a total myth. Next topic of debate. Do you draft players purposely that have favorable playoff schedules in the fantasy season?
That's a good question. I think, well, first of all, this is assuming you have a playoff format. So, I mean, that's obviously something you want to look at. But I wouldn't say so because I would just go after the best players because, first off, you have to get to the playoffs.
That's right.
And number two, you don't know how those teams are going to be. I mean, you might think those teams are going to be bad because they were last year, but things change quick in the NFL.
Yeah, for instance, if you're drafting like Ezekiel Elliott over Alvin Kamara simply because the Cowboys have a favorable schedule in week 15 and 16, how do you know Ezekiel Elliott doesn't get hurt before that happens and he's out during those weeks? How do you know that Alvin Kamara just doesn't blow up and have explosive games against really good defenses? And how do you know those defenses that they're playing in weeks 15 and 16 are the same as last year where they weren't as good? They might be better this year. So this is an absolute myth. Do you agree?
Yeah. I mean, I think we should add, just to be fair, at some point in the season, you probably do want to start planning for the playoffs.
Yeah.
But to think that you can do that from the beginning of the season when you don't have all the information, the season's going to play out how it's going to play out, it might be a mistake to think that you can assume how things are going to be early. Okay, what about when you're drafting and you notice that you have one player and he's got a certain bye week, and then you see another awesome player, and oh no, he's got the same bye week. Is that a huge problem?
No, this is a complete myth. So you're going to tell me that you're not going to draft Michael Thomas and Josh Jacobs because they have the same bye week? No, you take both those players. You sort that shit out later. You don't worry about bye weeks. The only time you worry about bye weeks is say you have a guy like Patrick Mahomes. You're going to play him every week, and you just need a backup quarterback to fill in one week. You probably want to make sure he's not on bye the same week as Patrick Mahomes. But other than that, this is a complete myth.
Yeah, I would have to agree in general. Same as everything we talk about. There's different factors. You should never take anything we say as,
Gospel.
as gospel. You want to use your own brain and figure things out, and situations change. But if it's a total points league versus a head-to-head league, that could change things. If it's a total points league, as long as you can scrap together some kind of a lineup, you might be okay. But in a head-to-head league, that could be a big loss for you.
Some people like to punt one week. Like if you draft a bunch of studs, they're all out week 7 in a head-to-head. You might lose week 7, but for the rest of the weeks, you're pretty good. So
Yeah.
it just depends. It's a matter of taste, I guess. But really, it's a myth. You should never really use a bye week to determine whether you want to draft like a really good player or not, right?
Yeah, just make sure that you're going to have backups. If you're looking at guys that are going to score a lot of points for your team and carry your team, if they're going to be out the same week, probably not a big deal as long as you have some kind of a backup plan.
Exactly. Next topic of debate. ADP, it doesn't matter. You take your guy or your sleeper whenever you see it to be necessary.
Wow, that's a tough one. I would say, if you think a guy is going to go ballistic and you really can picture him carrying your team, you might want to do that. You might want to grab him around early. Maybe you don't want to risk losing him. For instance, a guy like Lamar Jackson last year, if that was your sleeper, that guy was going to carry your team.
Yeah, that's
That would
true.
have been a huge move for you. But at the same time, ADP is so important. So many times when you have that great draft that just knocks it out of the park, it's because you followed the ADP and made sure, yeah, these guys were your sleepers, but you got them at the right time and you filled your whole team with them because you weren't drafting them too early. You got guys that you wanted in the earlier rounds, and then you got your sleepers later when it was
Appropriate. Yeah, so this is kind of reality to me. I've talked about this before. ADP is a tool you use to kind of know where players are going to go, but ultimately you got to throw ADP out the window. If you feel like a guy's going to be a super great player like Lamar Jackson was last year, you take him when you feel it's necessary. If you think because you're drafting at the turn or one of the turns, if you don't take him now, he might go in between those next 23 or 24 picks, then just grab him early. Who cares? Like, this is your team. You're building your team the way you see fit. And it doesn't matter if you take them a round or two too early. What you just don't want to do is take them 5 or 6 rounds too early. Well, then you've kind of shat the bed on that one. So this is reality. Just kind of monitor ADP and use it as your friend, but don't use it as the ultimate tool.
yeah, you don't want to reach.
You don't want to reach. That's the whole plan. Don't reach.
What about the idea that the more talented player will eventually get more playing time from the coach?
So the first thing that immediately comes to my mind is the incumbent starter in Indianapolis is Marlon Mack. And everyone is just assuming that Jonathan Taylor is the better talent. He's going to get the ball and eventually be the featured running back in that offense. And he's kind of being drafted as such. He's going earlier and earlier. People are just assuming because he's the better talent that he's going to get all the playing time. I think this is a myth. That's a dangerous game to play. You don't know what the coach is thinking. Marlon Mack might be a guy he trusts more because he's a veteran in clutch situations, and he may want to just continue giving him the ball and only sprinkling in Jonathan Taylor, or maybe making Jonathan Taylor give him like a certain niche role in the offense, whereas Marlon Mack is getting most of the featured carries. So that's a very dangerous, slippery slope. I would say this is a myth.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times this has bit me in the butt. You draft a guy, you're big on him. He was great in college. That's always the thing. You're always waiting for the guy to explode, and the coach just won't give him his opportunity. That's why fantasy football is usually more about the situation and opportunity than, it's combined with the talent, of course, but
Everyone's got talent in the NFL.
True.
Some have a little more than others, but really it's all about opportunity, like you're saying. And you don't know what the coach is thinking, what kind of schemes they're running. You really have to be careful on this one. All right, here's another topic of debate. People like to go into drafts and kind of say things like, I want to draft a certain quarterback because they're always going to be playing from behind. Their team is terrible. Therefore, the quarterback will get lots of opportunities to throw the rock.
I would say there's an element of truth to that sometimes. You could get lucky and maybe the quarterback does have to throw a lot and does throw a lot and scores a lot of points. But at the same time, if the team is bad, sometimes they're not going to be on the field. The offense isn't going to be on the field very much because the other team is going to be controlling the ball all game. And, not only may they not be on the field very often, but they could be down huge late in the game, and maybe the coach just opts to rest his starters, and it's not even worth trying.
So they almost give up?
Yeah.
Well, here's a perfect example. Last year, the Cincinnati Bengals, everyone knew they were going to be horrible. They were going to be playing from behind. And if you drafted Andy Dalton, how'd that work out for you? That team was so bad they would get behind by so much. And actually, in the second half of the season, they just decided just to give the ball to Joe Mixon. Andy Dalton was kind of a train wreck, and then all the other quarterbacks they tried to incorporate, that didn't work out at all. So that's the perfect example of why this is a myth, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point because just because a team is bad or going to be from behind doesn't mean throwing is necessarily the way they're going to get back into the game. Some teams, they're just better at running. Coach is going to want to do that anyway. I mean, once they get behind by, a lot of scores, that's different. But how many times have you seen, guys try to come on the field and throw deep 3 times in a row and, they're 3 and out every time.
Another thing you got to think about is if the quarterback's young, like let's say Joe Burrow, and he's struggling and they get way behind, who's to say the coach isn't going to pull him and, try to protect his quarterback from going mental? Take him out of the game, let him reset, and try again next week. So now you got almost a 0. No, this is a myth. Avoid this situation at all costs. Don't assume because a team is bad that the quarterback's going to get plenty of opportunities. He's going to score a ton of points. Unless he's good. Like if he's Drew Brees, a couple years back, the Saints defense was really bad, and you knew they were going to be playing from behind, but Drew Brees is always throwing the ball, and they're not going to pull Drew Brees. That's a whole different animal. But other than that, myth.
So how about the idea that when you're drafting, you always want to look at strength of schedule and figure out who's going to have the easiest schedule?
Okay, this is a myth, and let me tell you why. Using strength of schedule to make your selections in the draft is a bad idea because it's based on last year. How do you know? Teams have lots of turnover every year, and they bring in different coaches, different schemes. The New England Patriots last year, who knew that they were going to be the number 1 defense in fantasy football? Not me. I know my boy Ted knew that, and he scored big from them. But most of the time, you have a new top defense every year. And so strength of schedule being based on last year, I don't know if I want to trust that on who I draft this year because it's all going to be different.
Yeah, it's definitely tough to try to make that decision based off of last year. I mean, I can't count how many times looking at strength of schedule has bitten me in the butt in the middle of the season when you think all the patterns. Sometimes a player's going against a great defense and he still goes off.
That's true. Always play your hammers against those great defenses because you just never know. A superstar is going to get his points no matter what. But definitely strength of schedule is last year. I'm not using that unless it's a tie between 2 guys. So here's an example. Let's say Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott are the guys you're looking at, and they're very similar in ADP. Then you might want to look at strength of schedule and kind of break the tie that way. But other than that, I would not use strength of schedule. This is a myth. And our last topic of the day. Don't draft a kicker or a defensive special teams unit until the last few rounds. Is that myth or reality?
Well, I mean, that would definitely depend heavily on the scoring system, especially with defenses. Sometimes defenses score a lot. Sometimes they score practically nothing. It depends. So if you're in a league with a scoring system that rewards special teams and defense a lot, you might want to look at one of those, heavy hitters in the maybe, mid to late rounds.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Kickers, always kickers in the last few rounds.
Yeah.
I can't say this enough. Kickers are like a dime a dozen. You don't know who's going to score the points for the week. It's all based on opportunity. If like, you might even say, hey, I got Harrison Butker on the Chiefs. I'm going to take him early. But why? Because the Chiefs, yeah, they might get in the red zone, but they might punch it in every time and you're getting a few extra points. Versus like maybe the Chicago Bears get 5 field goals and you have their kickers. So stay away from the kickers till the last few rounds. You're wasting your draft pick on those. Defenses, look at the scoring system and base your decision based on that scoring system.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence that the guy that drafts the kicker too early is always the newbie. Don't be that guy.
Also, that person's usually the one in last place. Don't be that guy. You know how in rounders, when you look around the table in 10 minutes, you can't figure out who the sucker is? If you're taking that kicker, you're the sucker. Okay? Stay away from the kickers to the last few rounds. So that's all we got for the day. I appreciate you coming over to the island, Ricky. You got a flight back to LA, so I know you need to get out of here.
Yeah.
But don't forget, if you like our Hawaiian shirts, whether you think they're cool or dorky and you want one, down in the description are the links to Amazon. You can go ahead and get you some shirts just like ours. And we appreciate you watching on the Guy Talk Network. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Aloha.
Thanks, guys. See you.
Don't forget, mock draft.